大家好，我是郭崇伦，今天跟大家分享我最近跟欧义文的一个访问。他是这一本书乔拜登他的中间路线能够重振美国吗？这本书的作者欧义文其实大家不会陌生，他之前出版的《野心时代》是他曾经在纽约客当记者的那一段时间，从2009年到2015年，他访问在中国的写作的一个集结出版。现在他调回美国以后，帮纽约客继续的做采访。他当时采访了拜登，以及跟着拜登的足迹，在美国，在去年的整段的选举过程当中，他的笔下描写拜登是怎么样一个人。那在刚开始的时候，我问他，拜登身上有什么样的特质吸引他要来写这本书？那他说，他听一个朋友讲，拜登身上同时有最不幸的一个部分，以及最幸运的一个部分。当然不幸有很多因素，其中包括他刚刚选上参议员的时候，他的太太跟他的儿子女儿就死于一场车祸当中，只剩下2个儿子。那这个事情给他非常大的刺激。当然他后来连串的想要竞选美国总统，争取民主党的提名都失败，这个是他不幸的部分。但是他同时也有很幸运的部分，我们听他怎么说。
The reason why I mention all of this is that actually here in Washington, where I live, most of the people who reach the highest ranks in government have led more or less simple, straight ahead trajectories of success. And the fact that he had suffered and failed along the way actually made him much more interesting to me as a subject of literature and of politics.
我接着就问欧义文，是不是就是因为他的家庭遭到这样的悲剧，让拜登总统对于他仅剩的儿子 Hunter Biden 采取了一个比较宽容的态度？尤其是他最近 Hunter Biden 卖自己的画作，竟然要价$50万一幅，引发的争议。白宫跟拜登总统本人对于这个事情非常的宽容，认为他可以去追求自己的事业。很多人都质疑，如果之前要求川普总统必须要符合高道德标准的话，现在是不是采取了一个双重的标准？欧义文回答，他认为拜登总统向来跟他剩下来的儿子 Hunter 之间有一种非常复杂跟敏感的关系，尤其是家人先后死于车祸，跟他的大儿子死于脑瘤啊。常常拜登对于 Hunter 特别纵容，有些时候遮蔽了他儿子现在做的事情，正在危及 Hunter 自己，正在危及拜登自己的政治事业的一个判断。当时拜登当副总统的时候，奥巴马政府曾经有人担心Hunter 曾经介入乌克兰的事情将给他的父亲带来麻烦，最后证明真的是如此。
I think on some level, there's also a piece of Joe Biden that feels sympathy for Hunter because of Hunter's problems with drugs and alcohol, because Joe Biden feels that inside his own DNA, in his own body, there is that weakness for drugs and alcohol. He saw it in his uncle. It's one of the reasons why he himself doesn't drink. You know, Joe Biden doesn't drink alcohol because he worries, as he said to me at one point, I know what damage it can do. I know what's possible. And he sort of thinks that there is a demon that is in their genetic code, and he worries about that. I think, I mean, he's never said that to me about Hunter, but it feels, my impression is that is a part of his interpretation of Hunter's life.
除了他不幸的部分，拜登也有幸运的部分。拜登曾经希望能够 代表民主党竞选总统，他寻求民主党提名长达30年之久，但是最后奥巴马提名他为副总统的候选人。为什么奥巴马选择他？我问他是不是跟拜登后来选择贺锦丽当副总统是同样的原因？欧玉文在回答的时候表示，这2个原因是有关联的，但是并不完全一样。
Biden was a natural choice for Obama for 2 reasons. One, he could connect him to white voters in the Midwest. And also he had experience with foreign affairs. And Obama had very little experience with foreign affairs. He'd been in the Senate only a few years. He really didn't know much about he didn't have much experience with diplomacy or with complex foreign interactions. Biden had been chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He actually had some of this confidence and credibility on foreign affairs. With Kamala Harris, it's somewhat different. Kamala Harris, of course, does provide something valuable to Biden in terms of putting him in touch with Black voters who might not feel naturally at home with Biden in quite the same way. So in that sense, there is some connection there. But Kamala Harris does not have experience in foreign affairs. She didn't bring that to the ticket. What she brought to the ticket was a more progressive reputation, and she's younger, and she was able to make Biden look like he was more connected to young Americans. He is, after all, 78 years old. And, the average American, or the median age of American, is about 37 now. So, she is somewhere in the middle, and she helps give him a linkage. And I think that, he recognizes one piece of this, which is that you don't want your vice president to be a perfect copy of yourself. There's no reason for that. You actually want your vice president to make up for what you don't have.
在选举期间，当然有很多人在拜登的年龄上做文章。刚刚欧义文也提到，拜登已经78岁，他比川普还要老啊。认为拜登他的精神、他的体力都不适合当总统。有一个说法是，拜登可能只会做1任，之后会由贺锦丽来替代。那欧义文在访谈中，他认为是谣言多过事实。他说，他认为拜登现在还没有决定是不是要选第2任。假设他要连任，但是现在他不用做决定。他是非常了解，拜登是非常了解政治上是非常微妙的。只要他现在一做出暗示说他不会连任，马上讨论的焦点就不会是他，而是转移到贺锦丽了。回到去年的选战，我问欧义文说，为什么最后拜登会取得胜利？是什么样子的决定性因素？是他的个性呢？是他的中间路线呢？还是有一个整个有一个气氛，有一个动力，大家都想要把川普拉下马，不让川普继续连任？他认为这3个因素可能都有。拜登最有利的因素是因为他的个性，他个人的经历都是川普的，正好是反面。川普非常戏剧化，拜登是有点乏味，非常的平板。川普是善于侮辱人，非常的粗俗，拜登比较有教养，比较是文明，没有攻击性。而美国人呢，事实上对川普已经非常厌倦了，这是最重要的因素。
But then there's another important piece of it, which is, I think, is an important detail to understand his political situation, which is Biden was the most conservative Democrat out of a field of 20 Democrats. So, there were younger, more dynamic, more progressive Democrats, but actually the American public is more like Biden than they were like Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. So in the end, the irony is Biden is actually a centrist. And even though American politics feels very dominated by the extremes. The vast majority of the American public, according to polls and surveys and everything we know, is that most people still adhere to some version of the middle. And Biden was the least disruptive member of the Democratic field.
欧义文一直强调拜登是中间路线，他最温和，而且这让我质疑他的说法，因为拜登曾经在选举的时候说，一旦他成为总统，因为他是中间温和，他可以跟国会的来共事，不会像过去产生白宫跟国会对立的情况，而且他还会凝聚两党的共识。可是用现在的情况来看，他做到了吗？共和党一直用冗长发言 filibuster 这样子的议事技巧在干扰阻挠整个的法案的进行，他有没有办法去争取共和党呢？拜登目前想象中的两党共识欧义文也承认只留在想象当中，在华盛顿还没有看到。不过有些议题上面仍然是可能的，像刚刚通过的基础建设法案拜登对于这个事情一向就有信心，认为他可以得到足够的选票，可以通过。那如果这个是对的话，他会证明他的想法是成立的，在有些基本的民生议题上面，就像欧义文说的 bread and butter issue 是有可能达到政党的共识的。可是现在他有一点卡在当中，一方面共和党在反对他，另外一方面民主党里面的左派其实对于现在目前推不大动是非常的反感的。将来有没有可能再往前进？是不是拜登他做这样子的赌注，证明是对的还是错的，让民主党陷于一个困境？这是拜登现在面临的一场豪赌。这个是欧义文的看法那我特别想问他，就是民主党的这些比较前进的左派，他们会不会最后会对于拜登想要跟共和党合作而最后失望跟幻灭，甚至有人现在在酝酿讨论把这个 filibuster 冗长发言一举要推翻。欧义文的看法是这样子。
They're definitely getting irritated, but they haven't yet broken with him. They really believe that the filibuster needs to go. They think that he is wasting time by holding on to it. But he has been, I think, very shrewd politically in managing to keep their support using other things, like this big, what's known as the human infrastructure bill, which is the $3 trillion bill that would cover things like support for the elderly, climate change, things like that. They don't want to lose that. And so they're not breaking with him yet. And so this is an example of where Biden's long career is proving to be somewhat valuable to him, because he has been through a lot of political battles and he knows about how you build a coalition, how you have to give a little bit to this team and a little bit to this team, and you never give anybody too much or too little. It's a very complicated thing, and you could fail at any moment. But so far, he and the people around him have been able to maintain this very fragile and fractious Democratic Party.
接下来，欧义文就举出来，桑德斯参议员在初选的时候跟他是处于竞争状态的，可是现在桑德斯参议员是完全支持拜登的，那这就代表说进步派里面其实最后是可以跟拜登来一起合作的，大家之间至少在目前双方都有共同的一个目标。接下来我想问他的是关于他的外交政策，因为拜登在很多政策上面都是逢川普必反，就是 anything but Trump， 但是在外交政策上面有些部分就是延续的。我先问他的就是关于从阿富汗撤军的问题，那拜登的考量，他后面的计算是什么？美国是不是能够继续的 在阿富汗撤军之后，还能够维持自己海外的一个信誉啊，是不是跟拜登一直想要放弃，就是美国不要这么多的海外介入，这个所谓 forever war 永远战争的这个想法是有关的。
Biden has said for a long time that he thought the United States was pursuing a fantasy in Afghanistan, a fantasy of achieving democracy through introducing it from the outside. As Biden said to me a few years ago about Iraq, he said, we can't want democracy more than the Iraqis want democracy. And that belief is how he also thinks about Afghanistan.
欧义文在谈到为什么美国要决定撤军的时候，他谈了很多跟国内政治有关的事情啊，尤其是比如说拜登个人的经历，拜登是从卡特总统以后第一个总统，有自己的儿子参与这一次战争的。那之前就是杜鲁门总统，所以已经很久以来没有美国总统，美国第一家庭有自己的儿子有参与这个战争的。当然，大家知道这是他的大儿子 Beau Biden。那也因为这样子，他跟他的太太吉尔啊，参与很多这些军人家庭的事务，甚至吉尔创设了一个支持军人眷属的组织。然后所以拜登跟奥巴马跟川普不一样，他特别对于海外的派驻军队，他有个人的感情在这里。欧义文他自己也去过很多美国的这些小乡镇，尤其在美国基地附近的这些小城镇啊，那些曾经海外派遣去的军人回来以后，战争的冲击是非常大的。那拜登尤其觉得现在美国出现了这些问题，让川普能够得势，都是发生在这些小城镇里面，因为华府这些做政治决定人没有办法结束战争，所以导致在美国的很多地方受到战争的冲击，所以他现在认为应该是要老老实实的跟美国老百姓讲，我们应该要结束这个海外的介入，包括在阿富汗以及在伊拉克。但是这个同时也会有一些外交上的影响。难道拜登这边不担心美国的盟友会非常的忧心美国正在重蹈越战的覆辙吗？欧义文是这样说的。
So Biden recognizes there is a major risk to America's reputation in the perception that it is abandoning Afghanistan, but he also believes there is a risk to America's reputation in staying in Afghanistan in an unwinnable war, in which it is in effect losing lives and losing its resources in pursuit of something that has been impossible in 20 years.
我继续的追问欧义文这一点，尤其是对于在亚洲的国家来说，看到越南的情况会非常关切这个事情，是不是美国能够继续维持它在国际上的承诺？那这个是不是代表说美国它会抛弃在越南以前曾经他支持过的人？那美国现在目前政治圈里面有没有觉得这是一个很严重的问题，还是根本就不觉得？欧义文说，其实当然在美国政治圈里面大家是有谈这个事情，而且很有争议，但是现在主要都是在谈就是曾经帮助过美军的这些议员重新翻译的人员重新安置啊等等，怎么样子来减轻这个事情的冲击。
There's a separate question, of course, which is, is there a dishonor in the fact that Afghanistan will probably end up in the control of the Taliban, and that the gains for women and for people who believe in an open society, that those will be deeply damaged? That is it's also a controversial point, and there are people here criticizing Biden for it. But I think that there is, in the end, there is some exhaustion in the United States with the idea that they tried for 20 years to transform Afghanistan, and they failed. And there is a feeling that would it be better in another 20 years? Because nobody is able to say yes. That has fueled the argument that that there's no strong argument for staying.
当然，另外还有一件事情是，拜登继续川普的政策，就是对中国强硬啊。原来北京方面是期待拜登上台以后会是一个比较友善的一个美国政府，可是现在发现，拜登竟然比川普还要鹰派，还要强硬。我问欧义文说为什么会这样子？毕竟他在中国待了这么久，他曾经做过纽约客的中国特派员了。究竟是因为美中之间的敌对最后发生的这个结构性的变化呢，还是现在因为两党已经都有反中的共识？
I think there's two things going on, and you're right. Your suggestion is right. The first one is that there really has been a fundamental shift in elite opinion in the United States, in Washington, and in other influential circles, that the engagement policy, which had, of course, been in place since 1972, has failed to make China a more cooperative partner with the United States, or a sufficiently cooperative partner. And that change has come about. It was actually beginning to change before the Trump administration. And it didn't become fully visible until Trump, and until some of the people in his administration began to turn that into policy. But the mood was already changing in Washington. And I think the truth is that there are some of the senior officials in the Biden administration involved in Asia who have spent part of their career waiting and hoping for China to satisfy their hopes and their expectations when it comes to reducing cyber threat and ending the construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea, and some of the other commitments that China made under the Obama administration. And when those commitments were not satisfied, it radicalized a generation of American China hands.
欧义文在谈到这几年的美中关系的变化的时候，他特别提到就是川普的上台不仅是让美国人非常惊讶，也让中国人也非常惊讶。中国人开始怀疑他自己对于美国政治的一些假设、分析还有判断是不是还是可靠的。然后川普常常因为自己冲动的决策，往往一天一个方向。这个有些时候太浪漫化习近平，企图跟他建立起私人的关系，有些时候就完全翻转，用一些惩罚性的一些政策。那这让北京方面非常的担心，弄不清楚究竟这是暂时性的现象还是永久性的。那欧义文很担心，现在这已经变成一个美中关系的新常态了。他跟几个研究美中关系的朋友说，现在是一个非常危险的一个时刻，那要保持警觉。将来相互之间的美中之间相互不信任会导致冲突。
Right now, a tough policy on China is one of the only things in Washington that Democrats and Republicans agree on. And so that's pretty rare. There's very few things they agree on. And
that's exactly what I want to ask you. I mean, is it that the Biden administration is not totally innocent, since he's using this anti-China consensus to push some of the legislation they are having, right?
Yes, he's using it. I think he's using it not for cynical reasons. I think part of it is he really believes that the United States right now is facing a crisis of democratic credibility. Mm-hmm. And he believes that if the United States is unable to do the most basic functions of government, build a road, build a bridge, that other countries around the world really will begin to look at China and say, this is a stronger, more viable alternative. And so he is using it partly for political purposes, but that doesn't mean he doesn't believe it.
我接下来想问，在两国关系里面很重要的一个部分就是元首之间的私人关系，也就是拜登跟习近平之间的关系。在选举期间拜登一直强调他跟习有私人的交情，他可以更好的来处理美中之间的关系。但是在上个月他访问完欧洲之后，有一个记者问他，他跟老朋友习近平的关系的时候，他马上就反驳说，我们要把一件事情弄清楚，我们之间不是老朋友，仅仅是工作的关系，我们认识彼此。我问欧一文说，你怎么解释为什么拜登会有这样子的反应，而习近平听到拜登这样讲，他又会作何感想呢？这个事情其实很有趣，因为欧一文整个在写他这一本拜登的书的时候，是从拜登的个人的特质来分析。我们听他怎么讲。
The truth is that Xi Jinping does not consider Joe Biden a natural friend. He considers him a very important and powerful counterparty. And in some ways, Biden is being honest and realistic when he says, we're not friends. That's not what we are. We are people who have had frank and long conversations, and we have some knowledge of one another, and we're committed to having deep and serious debates and negotiations. But let's have no illusions. We will not be friends. And I think actually what he's doing is something that's partly a response to Trump, which is that Trump used to say that he and Xi Jinping were friends, and that sounded actually quite naive to anybody who really understands the nature of foreign affairs, and particularly China. China is very alert to the possibility of powerful countries trying to bully it and take advantage of it. And if Donald Trump imagined that he could invite Xi Jinping to his house in Florida, to Mar-a-Lago, and that they would build some personal relationship that might make Xi Jinping calculate his interests differently, that was always unlikely to anybody who really thinks about foreign affairs. Joe Biden believes that Xi Jinping and Joe Biden are going to calculate their national interests in clear-eyed terms, and hopefully they'll be able to arrive at some peaceful, negotiated areas of cooperation. But I think the key point, when he says that I know this man, what he's really saying is that he spent a lot of time trying to understand what Xi Jinping's personal and political situation is. This is actually a very important part of Joe Biden's thinking. Biden, as you know, often says that foreign affairs is simply an extension of domestic affairs. You cannot understand what another head of state is doing unless you understand what are the pressures on him at home. Where can he make a deal? Where can he not make a deal? Does he sleep well at night, or does he stay up at night with nightmares and with the problems? And Joe Biden spent a lot of time with Xi Jinping, of course, when they were both in the vice presidency. So he actually has given a lot of thought to trying to understand what is at the core of Xi Jinping's view of himself and the world. And I think one important point is when Biden came back from meeting with Xi Jinping during the Obama administration, one thing Biden did say internally inside the U.S. government to some of his colleagues in the Obama administration was, this guy is not a Democrat. And I think that assessment obviously is correct. And Xi Jinping would agree with that assessment. But Donald Trump, frankly, did not really have that kind of experience in foreign affairs. And so he approached it in his own way.
欧义文在讲习近平的时候，他有非常冷静的一个判断，所以我问他之前副国务卿薛曼在天津大家原来都期待他的访问会导致10月在 G20 的时候会开了一场美中的高峰会，那他自己评估有没有可能有这场高峰会，这高峰会是不是会恢复美中的互动的一个关系呢？还是说不会有什么样的差别？那他刚开始的时候一直强调说，他觉得现在判断是不是会开高峰会，会谈什么项目，还为时过早，他不愿意猜测。但是他自己对于拜登跟习近平的高峰会有他自己的一个分析跟看法。
Biden believes there is unique power in personal summitry, but he doesn't believe that it is the solution to all your problems. So, meaning that, yes, he definitely wants to get in the room again with Xi Jinping when the time is right. But this is, again, a difference between Biden and Trump. Biden really does not believe that he can make another leader do something that is contrary to that leader's interests. He doesn't believe that. What he believes is that he can try to find a path in which both sides can find it in their interests to agree. And so what that means is whether there's a summit in October or not, the underlying structural issues and challenges and obstacles in the relationship, that's actually the core of the matter. There's no question. Joe Biden respects Xi Jinping. That's clear. He respects his power. He respects his position. He respects the fact that Xi Jinping has conducted himself and consolidated his power in quite dramatic ways. There's no question about that. And they don't need a summit for Biden to demonstrate his belief in Xi Jinping. They already know each other. They need to have a summit when they actually are at a point where they're ready to try to break through some of these difficult issues. And that's something that is really about the preparation for the summit. The summit is really only going to happen when they've already made all the preparations for they're not going to just have a symbolic meeting of the kind that Donald Trump used to have.
现在拜登政府最在意的应该就是在明年11月美国期中选举的胜负了。那虽然现在好像还早，但是从60年代以后开始新的总统往往在第一次期中选举都会输。目前拜登在民主党在众议院跟参议院的多数都是非常的少的那这意味着拜登可能会在众议院跟参议院都会失掉多数，这个对他要推动政策跟他的连任会有很大的一个打击。那我问欧义文说，拜登要怎么样子来扭转这个劣势？
History and the momentum would suggest that he's most likely going to lose control of Congress. The current predictions that I find compelling are that he will probably lose the House. He might keep the Senate. You don't know, but the effect is the same, which is at that point, all of the division and polarization in Washington will just go sky high through the roof. So the chances of achieving legislative achievements are very small. But his strategy for maintaining control of Congress, they're making a serious effort to try to do it. And one of the tactics that they're using to try to keep control of Congress is not getting rid of the filibuster. Their belief is that if you get rid of the filibuster, when I say they, I mean the White House. The White House belief is if you get rid of the filibuster, you give Republicans a very powerful talking point. You give them something that they can go and campaign on. They can say, look, Democrats are bullying us. They are depriving us of any opportunity for serious debate. And so, yeah, Biden last night in his town hall here in Washington said, you understand that if we get rid of the filibuster, that's all Republicans are going to be talking about. And so that's part of their strategy, is to appeal to the moderates. This is the key thing. Biden was elected by peeling off enough people, sort of moderate Republicans, and keeping enough Democrats that in the end, they were able to win the presidency.
这个还是一样，是拜登的中间的路线，他就是要诉诸中间选民。这个基本上并没有变。我最后再问欧奕文，他说现在要怎么样评估拜登总统的一个表现？我们知道美国通常在100日的时候会做一个评估，在1年满了周年以后也会做一个评估，但是在目前拜登上任半年的时候，他的评价是怎么样？
I'd say that they get their grade would be a B, because the reason I say that is they get some good marks for having driven down the death rate from the COVID pandemic. 90% of the deaths have been reduced per day here, which is a transformation in daily life. But they've also made mistakes, particularly on the southern border with Mexico. They have now struggled to try to prevent the rise of the Delta variant, and so but the truth is the economy is going well, and the fact that we are talking about things like debates about inflation and about withdrawing from Afghanistan, those are serious issues, but they're normal political issues. We're not talking about a president of the United States who is trying to get a foreign power to give him political dirt on his enemy. So I think the basic fact is Joe Biden is not perfect, but Joe Biden has returned American politics at least to the realm of the recognizable.
今天非常谢谢您收听，因为访谈的这个受限，我们在 podcast 的时候只能够用原音来播出，也希望您能够喜欢，谢谢，我们下周见。
上网搜寻 VIP.udn.com 到联合报数位版看更多精彩的报道。